Hello, everybody. It is Thursday in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My name is Adam Bittner, assistant sports editor for multimedia at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, joined for our weekly Penn State football podcast by Seth Engle of the Post-Gazette and the Daily Collegian. Took last week off. Things were a little hairy with all of the Pirates home opener or just regular Pirates season opener talk and all that. But we are back talking about some Penn State football spring practice. We're also going to talk about a big recruiting loss for James Franklin. Seth, how are you?
I'm doing well. Yeah, I'm sure last week was pretty busy for you. And how about the Buccos? Pretty hot start. My Mets not so much. So it was nice to have some baseball and take a week off. But football is full steam ahead here. So.
Yep, spring game going to be before too long. That's always an exciting date on the calendar. Always a good chance for a lot of people to, if you don't get up there during the season, because the weather can be bad, all that kind of stuff. Spring game is usually always a great time to catch up with friends, family from around the state, from around the region who want to come in for a nice day of football. A lot of people may not make it into the stadium, but we're here to talk about the football. Seth, let's start with this big recruiting loss for James Franklin. Matt Zollers, a quarterback prospect, 4 stars. I got the numbers here. It was rated the number 1 prospect in the state, number 5 quarterback, number 46 prospect overall on 3. I think there's similar numbers over at Rivals 247. He decides to go to Missouri. He's from Royersford, PA, so an in-state recruit. He chooses Missouri over the Nittany Lions. Big recruiting loss. Seth, could you add some context and what this loss means for Penn State?
Yeah, it's huge. And there are a lot of people right now I'm seeing on Twitter, people in my, replies that are saying, well, the QB room is full. There are enough people here. Ethan Grunkemeier's having a good offseason. Like, he's the future. Bo Prabula's there. Jackson Smolik. I get that. But I've seen this kid's film, this Matt Zollers guy, and, he is going to be a star. He is unbelievable. And the recruiting sites, you're starting to see they realized maybe a few months ago that this kid was the real deal. But it really doesn't take too long into his tape to show that. Where I see like some Johnny Manziel in him, where this guy, I think first and foremost, has a massive arm. He can just launch the ball, but he kind of runs all over the place. But he moves his feet well, and this is just a guy I think has the energy and maybe the it factor that I think can make a really exciting quarterback. And it's a guy, as you mentioned, number 1 player in state, that I think James Franklin would have loved to bring in, at the very least to add some competition. So for him to go to Missouri after only 2 visits, and he went to Penn State for 7, and it's only 2 hours from his hometown in Royersford, it's a big loss. It's a real big loss. But there's still, at least another year of Drew Allar and some other potential successors. But, big loss for Penn State indeed.
Is this the consequence? I mean, I guess the question has to be asked, is this the consequence of what happened with Drew Allar last season, where the expectations were high? I think he met them in some regards, but obviously did not play well in the big games. Did not pile up stats the way that I think people were hoping. Did not pile up highlights the way that I think people were hoping. Didn't always make it look easy, even when he was in full command and winning games for Penn State. If you're a guy like Matt Zollers and you're looking at that, do you pause and say, hey, maybe I want to see things play out, or I'd like to take a shot at another program rather than be the next Drew Allar, which I think it's too soon to call Drew Allar a bust. I think we'll see how he does this season. I think I have high expectations, high hopes for him. But if you're a prospect and you don't have the luxury of time to wait that out, like you and I do, Seth, I mean, there's just the consequence of what went wrong last year with Mike Yurcich and how attractive Penn State looks to recruits who want to be on that 3-year track to the NFL.
Yeah, and I think along the same lines, I do think that Missouri is a very attractive program right now. Eli Drinkwitz, what he's doing over there, is pretty incredible. And they have a guy named Brady Cook over there who's done great things at the quarterback position. And I think, once Zollers took a couple visits there to get to know him, that's a guy who I think people really buy into. And it's really worked out at Missouri, and we saw that all last year. Penn State, kind of like you mentioned, there's just not that history with quarterbacks. You can go back quite a while to the last, quarterback that truly panned out in the NFL from Penn State. Like, I know Trace McSorley's been in and out in the league. Christian Hackenberg was a second-round pick. You could say, I guess you could make the argument for Will Levis now, but not really. But it's just not really there to convince quarterbacks to come and for them to bring in their star quarterback recruit, Drew Allar. And, some of those struggles were there last year, and he didn't really pop out on the tape, like you mentioned. I do think that speaks to potential recruits, and also the fact that the quarterback room is very deep. Zollers would have been the second quarterback recruit in that 2025 class. There's already a guy, Beckham Kritza, who's coming in as well. So that level of competition, maybe that's a little unattractive. But I still think there probably would have been a great shot for Zollers to start, as soon as his sophomore year.
Right. I think he would have been on the preferred track, Seth, I think, and some of these guys that we like a lot as prospects, Bo Prabula, Jackson Smalling. I know there's a high regard for him within the program, from the way fall camp went last season. I think the good news for Penn State in the circumstances, you're not in a bad place. And to your point, kind of about the situation at quarterback over a period of decades, you're right. I mean, it's not been pretty, and James Franklin has made what I think is incremental progress. You went from guys not going to the NFL at all. You think of Anthony Morelli, you think of Darryl Clark, you think of Michael Robinson didn't make it as a quarterback. Guys who had success at Penn State didn't go pro at that position. Now you have Trace McSorley stay around for a few years. You have Sean Clifford backing up Jordan Love. You have Will Levis, to your point. Now you're showing yourself to be a path to the NFL, but just maybe still not a preferred path. And I think that's a point worth reinforcing, is that James Franklin seems to be making incremental progress, and that's good. But this is also not going to be an overnight thing where top quarterback prospects are beating down your door. Seth, when we were texting before the show, you said, hey, maybe could this be a Nolan Rucci, Julian Fleming situation where because Drew Allar is presumably the starter this year anyway, that you can go to Missouri for a year. You can kind of, let things play out before. And we should say, too, I mean, we're a long way from signing day here. Like, things can change. They always do. So, maybe Penn State, Drew Allar show out next year. Maybe we have a different conversation come December. But do you think that as we move into this portal era, that this maybe helps mitigate the loss a little bit? That, hey, maybe if things don't work out at Missouri, he's going to have a chance to come back home to a program like Penn State and come into a good situation after some of these guys we're talking about have kind of had their shot at that starting quarterback role here.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially when you go to a school that's so far from home, and you make that decision when you're in high school and you say, I love Eli Drinkwitz, I love what he's doing with the program, I want to go to Missouri. You really don't know what it's like until you actually get there, until you're far from home, your family's not there every week. It's a very different experience. This is like personal for me because I'm from Chicago, and I came out here to Penn State, which it's been a great experience, but it's very different. You can't see your friends all the time that you grew up with. All of that's kind of gone. And I think after talking to Julian Fleming this week, to kind of realize like how important it is to have family when you are a college football player, and it is such a hectic schedule. And it's brutal. It's every single day. And especially when you're a quarterback and all this pressure and everything that comes with being a college football player, I think that having that family support is really important for some of these guys. And, some of them are able to handle being across the country, some not so much. So, I think it is possible. James Franklin, he's not going to tamper with them, obviously, but, to not lose, any love for him or anything. And, keep that maybe in the back of his pocket for when he gets to Missouri, if he intends to sign there. Because like you mentioned, signing day's a long way away and transfer portal's a thing. And, Penn State, we saw this offseason, not afraid to go back and get some of their top recruits.
Yeah, and I think you segue well into the next topic, which for me was we finally got to hear from Julian Fleming this week. You were there. What did he have to say about the move to Penn State, the last handful of months, the whirlwind, all of that, and how he's kind of fitting in with this team with I think a fair amount of pressure. It's fair to say, Seth, given that Penn State didn't make a ton of other big additions at that position, and it's a position that really fell short for Penn State in 2023, in terms of expectations and in terms of recent history when it's really been much more of a strength for Penn State.
Well, the pressure goes both ways, and that's why I think it's a healthy marriage. Obviously, Penn State needs to improve at wide receiver. There's no question about it. They did not perform last year, and they're hoping for Julian Fleming to be that guy. This is a veteran kind of player who we've seen has the skills. Like if you look in high school and when he's healthy at Ohio State, he's a good football player. The pressure is on Julian Fleming now, also with one more year of eligibility to showcase on a consistent basis that he's a great wide receiver, because he hasn't done that throughout his college football career because of injuries. He just hasn't been able to stay on the field for a whole season, and he needs to do that this year if he wants to, look good and before that pre-draft process next year. And, I know he wants to have an NFL future. He told us he was even considering that, after he was considering 50-50 whether he was going to transfer or go to the draft. So I know that's something that's on his mind, and he wants to prove to the world this year that, he can play, and he can play without injuries. We're really just not going to know that until the season starts. But so far, so good. He said this is the first spring in 5 years of college that he's been healthy the whole time. So, that's pretty important. And, hopefully he's able to keep that going.
Did you sense a level of comfort, Seth, from him and speaking with him and, coming to Penn State, and he already had the familiarity from the recruiting process, all of that, but now he's here. Did you sense that there was maybe relief or anything like that he's getting this opportunity finally with a program that he knows a lot about?
Yeah, it's an interesting story just because of how close him and James Franklin had gotten during his initial recruitment out of high school, where Fleming was up on campus, maybe a dozen times. Like he had gone to practices, he had gone to games, he knew everything. Ultimately went to the rival, but similar to what we were just talking about with Zollers, made it friendly still. And since he's gotten to campus, this second time around, Franklin and Fleming have both said, there's no love lost. It's been great. There's really been no talk about the past. And he's around his family. His grandpa's been coming to practices, almost every practice. He said, I'll give him some tips here and there, which is a little funny. But, I think he's just kind of happy to be around the people he loves and really just focus on kind of getting the job done. And from what we've heard, teammates have loved him, and he's been doing a pretty good job.
Going to be interesting to see how that storyline plays out. Seth, I know you guys also got a chance to hear from Drew Allar and how he's fitting in this new Andy Kotelnicki system. What did he have to say, and how do you feel he's progressing in picking up this new offense after an up and down season for him?
Yeah, the story with Drew Allar was he's a new guy this offseason. He's talking, which is important. I think when you're a quarterback, we heard all of last season, this is a guy, he's quiet. He leads by example. He's not a very vocal leader. That's completely flipped this offseason. He said under Kotelnicki, he's letting the more competitive side of him out. He's talking to the offense. He's talking to the defense. He's laughing. He's really just having fun, which is kind of his key word yesterday. He's having fun playing football, and that's what's most important to him. I think, moving forward with what was, a pretty kind of uptight offensive system last year, I don't really fit his mold. Moving forward, I think he's going to fit well in a system that's more free flowing and just go out there and play, kid, basically that type of thing. And I think that's really going to be the biggest hint as to what, the Kotelnicki offense could look like for him.
Yeah, what do you think he's going to look like at his best here, Seth? Or what's the best case scenario of him in this offense look like? Because I think, maybe I'm guilty of it. I think a lot of other Penn Staters were too, of seeing a pocket passer in him, and being a guy who was going to tear teams apart that way. But we saw him flash a lot of that athleticism last year, and there's been a lot of these Josh Allen comparisons. Is that the prototype for Drew Allar moving forward? Is making those types of plays with his feet and his arm, and doing so with a level of creativity that's going to keep defenses on their feet, and not just because I think a lot of the times we saw him run last season, Seth, it was the routes broke down, no one was open, and teams didn't take him seriously as a running threat, so he was able to pick up 10, 15, 20 yards just by bailing out of the play. Are we going to see, I guess, a more proactive use of his athleticism in this offense?
I do think so, and that was something he discussed yesterday. Was working on his footwork a ton this offseason. That's been a huge focus for him, and also cutting back on some weight, and he is leaner, and he'll admit that too. He hasn't really lost a ton of weight, but he's refined, and he's worked extensively on his mobility, and really being able to make an impact on that in that creative kind of side of football that we have seen from Josh Allen. And I think we saw a little bit from Drew in high school, where go out there and improvise a little bit, just play football, play your style, don't think too much. And I do think we're going to see that. And I think that's what Kotelnicki, that's kind of what his vibe is like, I think, as a person. But I also think that's kind of what his playbook's going to look like as well, which I think should probably benefit everyone, not just Drew.
Yeah, and I think a key part of the Josh Allen comparison too is I think he's able to be a running quarterback at times, but not take a ton of huge hits because he knows where he's going and the defense doesn't. I think I got indigestion watching Drew Allar at times last season because he didn't know where he was going, and he was just taking what the defense was giving him, and sometimes that put him in some dangerous situations. So I think that's going to be an important development is how deliberate is he able to be in this offense when he uses his feet, and not just that, Seth, to your point, the footwork in the pocket and not just fleeing, kind of using it as a weapon, kind of like, remember Ben Roethlisberger back in the day, and he wasn't a huge runner, right? But he was able to move the pocket, kind of shake a hit, find a guy downfield. I think I'd love to see more of that from Drew Allar, where the movement is not just designed about running, but toward extending plays and not just running for his life, if that makes sense.
And creating opportunities for his teammates is like when you can draw defenders and also just give more time to your receivers. I think that's where he really excelled in high school too. When you see all those special arm angles and stuff like that, where he has to get creative to kind of just get the ball out because he's being chased away. We didn't see that at all last year. And that was the thing I think that really stood out with his tape was like, this guy is really able to make things happen that we don't see from normal quarterbacks. He's not just giving what the defense is giving him. He's not just forcing whatever his coaches are drawing up. He's being creative and he's kind of doing things his own way. He got away from that last year for sure. So, I'm really interested to see if, under this new offense, whether he's really able to become the Drew Allar that we all thought he was going to be.
Seth, I know you've been keeping an eye on the secondary, some interesting developments there in spring practice. What have you seen and who's caught your eye so far?
Yeah, I think safety has been probably the most interesting development, maybe on the entire defense, because things are really changing there. Tom Allen's brought this new position. It's still kind of a nickel. It's basically a nickel, but it's called the Lion, and it's basically this big, stocky, athletic safety who's going to play a Daquan Hardy type of role. So I think, that's basically been given to Jaylen Reed already. Tom Allen said, Jaylen's kind of emerged as the leading candidate to take it. But there's some other guys like King Mack who could maybe play that role as well. But there has been some great talk about, not just Jaylen Reed, but also Zakee Wheatley. James Franklin said he's playing his best football by far this offseason, and that there's a great chance for K.J. Winston, Jaylen Reed, and Zakee Wheatley to play on the field all at the same time. And I think that's pretty exciting because all three of those guys, I think, could have pretty monster seasons next year, specifically K.J. Winston, who has the chance to, I think, be an All-American.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see. And you and I have talked a lot about how the cornerbacks factor into that. Didn't look great in the Peach Bowl. Do you think that's partly a response, is saying, hey, like, we really like all of these guys, these safeties, we want to get them all on the field, and maybe you find some different packages to kind of accentuate your strengths and maybe mitigate your weaknesses a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, cornerback is definitely still a question mark, and we haven't even heard too much about, that position at all. We've heard about the two transfers and A.J. Harris and Jalen Kimber. A.J. we actually did not see at practice the other day. Not sure exactly what that means. We were supposed to talk to him, didn't get him. Kimber, he was there. We've heard good things about what he's brought. He's an experienced kind of SEC defensive back coming in, understands. But some of these young guys coming up, Zion Tracy, Elliott Washington, there's a lot of pressure on what they can do at cornerback, and Cam Miller as well to really carry what's been, I think, a pretty high standard for at least the past few years at corner.
Yeah, going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Seth, anything else on your mind in terms of who you got to talk to this week, who we've heard from, and how that's shaping your view of the rest of the spring here?
No, I think we pretty much covered it. There's definitely a different vibe when you walk into the practice facility than I think there was for most of last year, at least on the offensive side, where, it's fun, it's loud, it's energetic. And from talking to some of these guys, it really does seem like people are buying into this new offensive system. I think that's pretty exciting to think about.
Yeah, that's exciting as you look forward to a spring game. We know James Franklin said he wants to have a more traditional spring game because of the depth Penn State's cultivated. So hopefully we're not going to learn a lot. It's a spring game, but hopefully you get to learn something by seeing 4 quarters of football in Happy Valley here before too long. Seth, thanks for joining me this week. We will be back. When's the blue-white game, Seth? Is next week the week, or is it the week after?
Yep, it is next Saturday.
All right, well, then we will be setting up the spring game, what to watch for, position battles, all of that. Good stuff to come. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel. A lot more Steelers NFL draft talk as well. If you're one of those people who loves college football and loves to see where these guys end up in the pros, we've been talking about the draft almost every day here on the North Shore Drive. Brian Bacco and I have the mock draft tracker video that'll come out Saturday. So make sure you're subscribed for that. And if you enjoyed this video, please like it, help us out in the YouTube algorithm. We always appreciate that, getting a chance to be in front of more Penn State fans and build the community here. Always great to hear from you. So thanks for stopping by this week, and we'll talk to you all again soon.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.